Hello and welcome back to One Trek Mind with me, Raptor.
And me, Michael.
And today we're going through the second of the two episodes that was released for Strange New Worlds Season 3. So I'm going to let Michael get on with recapping the episode.
Yes, we begin with a 3-month time jump, as I suspected we were going to be doing, where we have everyone kind of getting ready for this Federation Centennial, the big anniversary of the Federation founding. We see La'an and Spock practice dancing, just having kind of a nice little moment between the two of them where, you know, we're getting a different side to La'an, seeing Spock try to loosen up a little bit. And they're clearly talking about, you know, his plans to basically win Chapel back over. Back on the ship, we see Scotty have this moment where he sees a strange anomaly on the sensors, but they just kind of brush right past it as Dr. Corby and Chapel both arrive, much to the surprise of Spock to see Corby there.
Yeah, I have thoughts about that. I definitely have thoughts about that.
It immediately becomes very awkward when it's revealed that Corby and Chapel are now in a relationship with each other. And then we go into the, you know, opening credits of the episode. Later we see Ortegas and her younger brother practicing some fighting moves, where Uhura walks in and meets him for the first time, and there's a little bit of romance, little sparks that are going off there. We then get to see this new ensign, who's a nurse, and we don't get the name of, which we both were kind of like, where's the name? I kind of like this character. Again, like number one is immediately like, I like you, and I agreed, and I was like, I wish I knew what your name was, though. I guess we'll find out maybe later on in the season. We then see Pike and Battelle talking about her now needing to return to her own ship and what kind of mission she wants to go on, but they already are missing each other and trying to navigate like how to go about this because they just spent 3 months in constant contact, whereas their whole relationship has been them kind of separated by a bunch of distance. So something for them to figure out. But we don't really return to this idea in this episode, so I'm assuming this is something we'll get back to in a future episode. We then go to Chapel and Spock, having a discussion about her bringing Corby home after wanting a break and how it doesn't really make sense that she would say something like that and then bring home someone, which again, we'll get into our feelings about that after the recap. But right at the end of this scene, we see like a face appear in the window of Spock's room. Again, further leading to like what this anomaly is and what's going on. Clearly there is a problem brewing. There's also a nice cute little scene with Ortegas, her younger brother, and Uhura, where again it just becomes more obvious that Ortegas' younger brother and Uhura are kind of feeling each other, but at the same time might just be screwing around with Ortegas. It's an entertaining little like dynamic that they have throughout the episode. We then go to the bar where Chapel is telling a story about her mom's last words to her and how Corby interpreted them into this like romantic moment between the two of them while Spock is listening, and it's painfully awkward, and I actually really feel bad for Spock during that conversation. I was like, that is kind of cruel, but at the same time he did ask for her to tell the story in the first place, so he's kind of doing it to himself at the same time. Again, we'll get into that as we break it down. But then a strange man appears at the bar, appearing as a Vulcan to Spock, and gives him this drink before he goes to bed. And as soon as he wakes up, he's, you know, slept next to Chapel, and they're talking about their wedding. So clearly some weird reality shifting shenanigans have just happened. And it's pretty obvious what caused it, but again, we'll get into that in just a moment. We then see Spock and La'an practicing their dancing again, but this time discussing the wedding instead of like getting Chapel back, so it's just a little parallel moment to show how things have shifted. Corby has now been relegated to best man, but clearly knows something is up. He's the only one who's acting like a little out of character during this whole scenario, and it does become pretty obvious at this point that who we're dealing with, or at least we thought was a Trelean.
Yes, we thought this was a TOS reference.
Yeah, because he's snapping his fingers and like creating
the hair and everything.
All this. Yeah, he looks almost exactly like the Trillian that we saw in the original series. And he has reality shifting powers. He's like changing was it cake that he was feeding them?
They were like canapes of some description.
But yeah, he like changes them so that Chapel and Spock love it, and it becomes obvious that he's the source of all this nonsense going on. At this point, we see Corby breaking into Spock's quarters, and it's revealed for sure that he has not been fooled by whatever is going on. He is aware that him and Chapel are supposed to be together, and explains to Spock this story of a poem he read to her, or recited to her, which gets Spock angry enough to punch him in the face, knock him out, and this snaps Spock out of the spell as well, and he is also like, oh shit, this is not how things are supposed to be. We need to take care of this situation. And then together, the two of them work out exactly what has been doing this, ruling out, scenario after scenario. And they bring up a nice little reference to the musical episode, which I am personally a huge fan of. But they do figure out this has to be some sort of all-powerful entity that is doing this to them, that has some kind of intelligence behind it. They then fail to get Sam Kirk to see the truth about what's going on by trying to bait him into attacking Spock by saying that his mustache is stupid and has like terrible
taste in wine. Which I fully agree with. I think his mustache is stupid.
I love his mustache. I don't know what you're talking about. They attempt to then tell the captain and a whole group of others during this dinner, but it's clear that just confronting people with the truth is not going to get them to realize what's going on. It's just confusing people. So they decide to sort of switch tactics, and they use the ship's computer to discover, who is this entity, and discover or confront him, and that does not go particularly well. He doesn't appreciate being confronted on this matter and basically threatens Spock and the entire crew into continuing on with the wedding and allowing his plans to go about as he wants them to. He even turns Spock into like a little mini Spock, puts him in a glass, which for me reminded me of the Doctor and his little smushed self in that one episode. Not to mention, there's a shot where we see this, all-powerful entity, like, curled up in bed right next to Spock, which has to be a reference to the Q and Picard moment, especially given what happens later in the episode. I'm positive that is a reference to that. At the wedding, Kirby has been made the maid of honor at this point, has a little flower crown, and he's the only one who tries to object after the wedding commences, but is quickly turned into a dog, which, again, nobody notices as weird, because, again, this Trillian, but maybe not a Trillian, as we'll discuss in a moment, is just reshaping reality at a moment's notice, so everyone just kind of runs with it. But to get through to Chapel, Spock then recites the poem that Kirby did, which does snap Chapel out of it, and, the plans for the wedding are ruined, so this Trillian, but probably not, is now about to kill everyone here. He's talking about all the ways he's going to do it and which random people he's going to spare. When suddenly, his dad arrives and puts a stop to it. And it becomes, I think, becomes obvious in this moment that this is a Q. This is not a Trillian. This is Junior and Q, the Q that we know from the next
John
gen.
Delancey shows up as a glowing ball of gas and verbally berates his son. So this is Junior from Voyager for the first time since Voyager.
He sure grew up to be just as annoying as he was in that show.
Indeed.
But yeah, they end up leaving after he chastises his son, puts everything back to normal. Then Pike has this really awkward moment where he kind of tries to save the day, saying, oh, well, the founding of the Federation was also pretty awkward, so let's go hit the bar. And then it's just a fairly happy ending to the episode. Everyone is dancing and having these little moments with each other. We see La'an and Spock talk about having no regrets, about, trying his absolute best to be with Chapel. It just didn't happen to work out, which I thought was a really nice little moment. You see Ortegas' younger brother and Uhura dancing together, agreeing that it's really fun to annoy Ortegas, which is, again, very cute little moment. But then you see this kind of somber moment as Ortegas is off by herself and ends up leaving before going back to the ship to practice some more fighting moves on a sandbag. And it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly that she's suffering some really severe PTSD from the Gorn attack that happened and her very, very nearly dying. And that's where we actually end the episode, is her, seeing this Gorn in the reflection of the window creeping up behind her, which I thought was almost kind of an odd choice to end such a whimsical kind of episode on such a dark moment. But we can kind of loop back around to that in a moment.
So I think there are two things to discuss straight away. What did we think of this being a Q episode? And what do we think of Nurse Chapel's behavior?
Let's begin with Nurse Chapel's behavior, because I have multiple opinions on this. I think the way it is presented here, it doesn't make me dislike her character, but it does make me think what you're doing and the way you've done this, it feels kind of cruel. Like
Yes.
Like you didn't think bringing your new boyfriend with you to see Spock for the first time after 3 months and taking this break, you didn't think that wasn't gonna really hurt him. That it feels kind of mean. That's something that you should prep someone for. At least send him some sort of correspondence saying hey, just so you're aware, I'm with this guy now and I'm bringing him along with me to the Centennial. But I'd say the bigger issue I have with this is I saw Jesse Gender actually bring something like this up. Nurse Chapel in the first season of this show, I felt was really well written, very nuanced, had a lot of personality. But in season 2, and especially here in season 3 thus far, has been relegated to just love interest, and is basically only getting storylines involving her love interest with Spock or her love interest with Corby now. And it does feel kind of weak to be taking this character that was kind of getting her own spin and everything to now just being the love interest constantly. I find it kind of lackluster for what could be a very strong female character. So I'm not really digging the direction they're taking Chapel. And again, I think the way she behaved in this episode was kind of fucking mean to Spock. She doesn't even say anything to him after they break off the wedding, saying hey, thanks for helping to stop this, considering that's not what I would want. She just ignores him and just goes off with Kirby, and I'm like, Chapel, I feel like you're being really mean right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the way that she handles this is not particularly good. And it seems pretty clear from the minute she beams on board with Corby that she's fully aware that this was not going to be good. But she's doing it anyway. Yes, she asked Spock for space, etc. But there's a big difference between that and saying, I'm going to pursue a different relationship with somebody I've literally just met So I have a little issue in that she goes to study under this guy and then they develop a relationship. That's
ethically a little...
They're both adults, but it's still ethically a little questionable.
He is still her superior.
Exactly. So I think that's a bit iffy. But yeah, I definitely agree that it's not... She doesn't handle it in the best way at all. The thing about her being relegated to love interest, I hadn't really considered that until you had just mentioned it. And now looking back on it, it does seem like that is what she has become now. Which is a bit, not great.
I mean, it just feels regressive, because that's all she was in the original series, was this woman who, kind of tragically just constantly pines after Spock, and he clearly does not feel the same way about her.
Now it's kind of the other way.
Yeah, now it's kind of the other way around, but it still makes her character just revolved around this romance with Spock, and it's tiring. I hope for the rest of the season they take her in another direction. and actually give her like a storyline that doesn't involve either of her love interests and is just about her. Like, I was kind of hoping that was what, the fellowship that she did for the 3 months was going to be, like her exploring herself and learning exactly what she wants to do with her life and everything. But I kind of knew that wasn't going to be the case as soon as they said Corby was her, like, the person in charge of the fellowship, because I know from the original series that they're engaged and obviously some romance was going to blossom there. But I just find it frustrating that that's all her character is now, and I think it's time for a little switch up. Like, she's been love interest for quite long enough. Let's give her something else to do.
So this as a Q episode,
I am mixed on it. On one hand, the canon in me is telling me, like, you're not supposed to meet Qs yet. That's definitely something at least implied to not have happened until next gen.
Yeah, I think the problem is that the original series and Gene Roddenberry did have a bit of a love affair with overpowered mystical beings, all of which could fall under category of Q, or, they were given different names: the Organians, the Medusans, the Trelane, the Q. Eventually, in the next gen, we just had the Q. I think, from a canon perspective, I think it's fine.
I mean, they don't ever find out what they are, so it's not like they would tell Starfleet or the Federation, like, hey, these things called Qs are out there, they can do anything. So yeah, I mean, canon-wise, it doesn't break anything, but it does, I feel like it's a little iffy to have that happen. And I guess Q don't exist on the same, like, timeline as other people, so it's fair to assume that, way back in the past, these two could have just jumped back there and decided to fiddle around with whatever they wanted to. I guess it was just really surprising when I heard John Delancey's voice, and I was like, wait, what? This is actually Q?
But I do hope this isn't indicative of Strange New Worlds deciding to sort of pick elements from Legacy Trek to try to do stories on them. For example, don't want to see a Borg episode.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I'm hoping they realized that the Q and the Trillian were so similar that they could kind of get away with it right here.
Don't think they'll get away with, Borg, for example. Or,
no, Borg was very, very much established in canon. Like, this only happened when Q threw them out there to meet them for the first time. And then they barely got away with some timey-wimey bullshit in Enterprise for doing it as well. So to put that into this series would be a huge mistake. That would be, if people wanted to criticize that for way overdoing it with the Borg, I would 100% be on board with that argument, because I do not need Borg in this show. Again, having the Q here, I'm okay with it. But I agree, it's a slippery slope, and I hope they don't go too far with bringing in legacy stuff.
Which leads us to a conversation that I think we're going to heavily disagree with, which is
Chapel's dress. Yeah.
Michael liked Chapel's dress. I hated it.
I thought it looked really pretty. That was a nice looking dress.
I think she looked like she got eaten by poison ivy out of Batman. No, it's the sort of placement of the episode. I feel that there needed to be an episode before this one. Maybe not doing such a massive 3-month time jump, but a smaller time jump to kind of bookend the events of the previous episode. To, show both Captain Patel and Erica starting to recover or in the process of recovery from the events, to explain what has happened after the events, because that big time jump basically means that the crew they're all happy and chill, and on the face of it everything is fine, and we don't know what's going on, what's happened in those 3 months. I understand that the show is not serialized like Discovery, and as a result Strange New Worlds always has this sort of thing where an event can happen and it's then kind of never, you don't immediately respond to it the episode after. I just feel that we had such big things happen in that first episode. The fact that Erica was critical but stable, Patel, she was recovering, but again, she, it's still iffy. The ship was clearly messed up. The whole situation with Gorn, had been solved, but, that isn't 100% surely. I just feel like it was a bit of a weird sort of sudden shift from here's a really horrible body horror filled episode to now we're having a chilled fun Q episode immediately afterwards. It was a bit jarring.
Yeah, you see, I really like that about this show, personally. I've seen other people also really criticize that choice, because they've done this before in seasons 1 and 2, where they'll go from one really heavy episode to a really light episode, and then back to another really heavy one. But I like that mixture of genres and emotions. It allows, I think, the show to kind of breathe, and it makes it more fun to watch, in my opinion. Like, there's one thing about a lot of streaming shows where I feel they get almost bogged down by how serialized it is, because you'll just go from one bit of tragedy to the next bit of tragedy to the next bit of tragedy, and it's just constant intensity, and it almost becomes exhausting to watch. Whereas I really like how Strange New Worlds says, here's your really intense drama filled episode, now you get something light just to kind of enjoy yourself for a little bit, and then we'll get back to the heavier stuff right at the end of the episode, and potentially the episode coming out next week. I like the dichotomy of going from the two extremes, but I can 100% understand people not enjoying that and feeling like it just feels disjointed and kind of messy. But again, I think that's entirely a personal preference kind of thing. Like, again, I like it. You're not the biggest fan of it, but here we are.
I think it's mostly just because of the fact that they choose to end the episode on her clearly having a PTSD of the events, and it's like, so we've just had a really happy episode, and then you're just going to end it with that.
I did think the ending was weird. The ending felt like it should have been maybe the start of the next episode and not in this one, because it was very, I do agree, it was jarring within a single episode going from one extreme to the other, because then I just got whiplash at that point. I was like, whoa,
especially considering
that's really heavy.
Like, throughout the episode it did on the surface appear that Erica was fine. Now, I understand that when it comes to mental health, a lot of the time people with mental health issues, they do appear to be totally fine until it's very obvious that they're not, but I'm not entirely sure that was what they were going with in the episode. It just felt like they presented her being fine 3 months on, and then at the very end, we'll have this PTSD flashback to end the episode on. If there had been other instances where it seemed that something was wrong, I think it would have worked better. And if there had been an episode previously where it was clear she was still recovering, she had PTSD, etc., then again, it would have been fine. It's just we've gone from everything normal to suddenly not at the very end. Yeah. It was just a bit jarring.
I pretty much agree with that.
Plenty of starship porn in this episode, which I like. It's nice to see some more of Starfleet outside of the windows. I was a little surprised to see some crossfield class, the actual crossfield class, outside of the window, at least 2 of them.
Yeah, I didn't believe you the first 2 times you said you saw it, and then there was one shot where I was like, that's undeniably.
That's pretty obvious, yes, undeniably. And it was you who pointed out, and you defend Discovery's design quite a bit.
In its own show, I think it looks okay. Here, but next to the other starships, I was like, oh, it doesn't look the best, actually. It just its proportions are really weird. Like, those nacelles are gigantic compared to the saucer section of the ship, and it does look really weird. Maybe it was, like you said, maybe it was just the angle it was shot at made it more prominent, but yeah, that one shot did make me go, maybe I don't like how Discovery looks, actually. Again, it's less jarring in its own show, where all the ships look kind of
like that,
and just different from what we're used to seeing in Star Trek.
And then the minute you see it next to ships that actually bear more of a close resemblance to the TOS design aesthetic,
it becomes really
so
obvious. It's like, wow, that's out of place. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have even noticed it, honestly, unless you had mentioned it, though, because I'm not typically looking in the background of shots. I'm looking at the characters in the foreground. But yeah, there was that one shot where they did make it a lot more apparent. There's like 2 shots in the episode where it's very noticeable, as well as many other ships all just kind of hanging out for the big centennial celebration.
But really, apart from that, I don't think there is... Like, this is quite a simple episode in reality, isn't it? There isn't much really to talk about apart from Q's getting up to their usual Q business.
Which is fun. It was a fun episode, I will say that. I had a good time with it.
There was one interesting bit of very minor information when Junior says that he caught Dr. Corby digging around in the dirt on the old homeworld. Which establishes for the first time that the Q have a homeworld somewhere.
Well, probably not anymore. That must have been very, very, very early on in their evolution before they became like ethereal beings that can do whatever they want.
But at least it does establish that they evolved somewhere, and it is not as how Q said it in Voyager that the Q have always just existed. There was a time when they were at least had a homeworld for some reason. So I thought that was a little piece of interesting little lore to add. But apart from that, yeah, it's a relatively simple, chilled episode. We're looking forward to seeing more of the nurse who has no name and the bartender who also has no name but has 3 arms.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot to mention her. Coolest bartender ever. Her doing her like little tricks with her 3rd arm. I was just like, that sounds really bad when I put it like that, but she literally has 3 arms. I want to clarify.
Seeing her with Captain Pike and Una talking, it did heavily remind me of many conversations that we see on the Orville of Captain Mercer and Grayson talking to their bartender, in the mess hall. I thought it was a very similar sort of feel. Very, don't know if that's if it's a direct reference, if they're pulling from it or anything, but I got a bit of Orville sense from that conversation.
I mean, I got minorly a little bit of Guinan from it, where I'm like, again, it's our bartender who we can just have a little conversation with and kind of work through our feelings with. That's definitely where I went with that, but I definitely see the Orville reference as well. And I thought it was kind of nice that to introduce these 2 new characters to the show, they didn't really have like an episode long like debate about whether they wanted to join Starfleet or be on a Starfleet ship or anything. They both were presented with the option and immediately were like, oh hell yeah, let's go. And I was like, all right, cool. Got ourselves a new character.
I've just realized that we've seen the 3-armed alien race before.
Oh, from Lower Decks.
She's in Lower Decks, yes, the Idosian.
That's right. I did forget about that. You think she's like an evil supervillain on her... What was it? It was a medical facility for like weird anomalies that happen to people. And you think
we thought they were evil and he turned out not to be.
Yeah, no,
and they're also in the original animated show as well. So
yeah, no. Finally got it in live action now.
Yeah, which is nice.
And not to mention, having 3 arms makes you, as I said, best bartender ever. The little trick she was doing by like flipping it over her head and sending it to the leather arm, and I was like, oh, she's so cool. I love her.
It makes sense considering you're in Vegas.
Well, yes, I've seen some pretty impressive bartending, so you got to do something a little more spectacular to impress me, and having that 3 arms to do that with, I'm all in. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any comments or concerns with the episode that you want to post down below, please do. Leave us a like, subscribe. Every little bit helps us grow the channel. But aside from that, that is going to be about it from me.
And goodbye from me.